sort this out with public safety in Hennepin County. It's not an answer. We tried to get an answer in time for tonight, but Hennepin County still doesn't know how to address it best. Public safety wants it to have the same street numbers. So we'll have to figure out a way to uniquely identify ADUs, and we'll have to put that into an addressing policy going forward, and we will work with the existing ADUs and get that taken care of. And what I am adding is the entryway to an accessory dwelling unit shall include identifying signage and be connected to the driveway with an improved walkway. Public safety is very concerned that without that, the access to the unit will not be very clear for them if they don't know exactly what they're looking for. So that will help kind of show that there is this other walkway to follow. So that's why that is there. And that is consistent with another city that had a similar clause. So. And then removal of a couple of IUP-specific standards that would no longer be relevant now that we're talking about either administrative or conditional use permit process. The staff report did discuss some other standards, but no changes are recommended at this time, including the owner occupancy requirement, parking standards, and the applicant had an initial request to add a septic system requirement, but it's just not very necessary to add it because it's something that already naturally happens with the building permit process. So we're comfortable with not having that additional layer in the code. So at this time, we should open the public hearing to take any public testimony, and then the specific topics for discussion that I would very appreciate your attention to would be the use type and review process, the size limit, and if there's any disagreement about removing the roof pitch requirement. Otherwise, staff recommends approval of the staff drafted ordinance with the removal of the roof pitch requirement. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone here for the public hearing who would like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm George Gamot, 22600 Oakdale Drive. I've lived in Corcoran all my life. Served on the council for 20 years, lived on the planning commission for a couple of years before that. And I still do volunteer work for the city, kind of behind the scenes. Really, this started out with an objective of getting a bathroom in an accessory building that is used and has been used since 1996 as a recreation building, provided an opportunity for our kids when they were in high school to have their friends over and have all kinds of music and loud noise out there, to play pool and ping pong and not bother us. We've now sort of moved on from that. The kids pretty well gone, one of them's still at home with us. We're looking at the prospect of adding the bathroom. My wife is adamant about getting the bathroom out there. She doesn't like to go back into the house every time. So with that, it only makes sense to also add a kitchen facility for the future. It doesn't make sense to just put water and sewer connection and everything and not take it all the way to an ADU. Now, the issue is that we have an existing building which is pushing the 800 square foot limit already. It's a building which I really don't want to do anything to as far as the interior of the building. If you look at the ceiling out here in the atrium, that's what my whole interior is like. It's a little bit nicer than this. But the whole interior is tongue and groove white pine that I put in myself in 1996, 97 in the wintertime. I was out there mitering pretty much all winter. I really don't want to cut that out. I really don't want to try to squeeze a bathroom and a kitchen area into that particular envelope. What I'd like to do is add another 16 feet onto the back of the building. I've already got the sewer connection sitting at the edge of where that construction would occur. I've got a new system that's just been put in for a 5-bedroom capacity. If I can't go with the 16 feet, it makes it very difficult. It really means that to do it, I would have to try to bring it back inside the building in order to accomplish the limit. Now, I did more research since my response on size limitations. And I can tell you that around the country, we are kind of at the tail end of the process of ADU development. Our major cities like Minneapolis and St. Paul and some of the suburbs have gone into allowing some ADUs, but we're really in its infancy here. We're still trying to undo all the damage we did since 1947 with the advent of all of the zoning ordinances that occurred following World War II when we put in tract housing oriented around car traffic. And so back in the day, people had all kinds of ADUs. They just didn't call them that. They were carriage houses and other types of uses. California, by law, allows ADUs. They allow it. And their objective is to try to get more affordable housing. We're not in that situation here. But their size limitations, unless they are modified some way by the local ordinance, are 1,200 square feet. That's their upside limit in California. They've been at it a lot longer than we have. They've been down there with the smaller sizes. They've kind of figured out that 1,200 works, and that's what they're using. State of New York has had something in front of the Assembly over the last couple of years trying to get ADUs passed at the state level. It's now been taken off the table since the last election because there's a lot of objections from the suburban areas where they don't really want the state telling them what to do. But their proposal at the Assembly was 1,500 square feet. In Blaine, I think that was one of the comparators that we looked at. They allowed 1,200, I believe, in a detached, but I think it's 1,500 in an attached building. So they do have a fairly large size. When you look at Corcoran, I know that there's a desire to probably have an ordinance that fits everything. But I sit on the Charter Commission. One of the things that we have been discussing for the last 4 or 5 years is the need to recognize that Corcoran is not just the new developments that are coming in, it's also the rural developments that already exist. And we need to be able to accommodate that. Now in California, one of the things that they've done is on existing buildings that are being converted, they don't have a size limit. It's just gone. So if you wanted to convert an agricultural building, for instance, and you could do it within the code and make it livable, if it's there, it's free game. You just go ahead and do it. I think in Corcoran, it would make sense because we have a lot of diversity in our rural residential districts. We have subdivisions that were put in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and some of them were even more recent. They're quite diverse. Some of them have 1 acre lots, some of them 1.5 acres. When I first got on the council, it was like 1.5 acres, and then about 1990s, it was bumped up to 2 acres. And so all of the lots in the rural areas that are developed since then are pretty good size. You could take a 1,200 square foot building and put it on that lot, and it really isn't going to be very noticeable. So we probably are in a situation where, because of that diversity, we may not want to have it as an allowed use, but rather conditional use, which leaves the door open for an applicant such as me, who's going to come in with an unusual situation, to come in and at least have a pathway to get an approval without trying to ask for a variance. The variance is not an appropriate direction for this type of application. If I were building new, I would probably be able to easily put it within 960 square feet if I were building fresh. And I don't disagree with that as a standard for the city. I don't disagree with that at all. But there has to be a pathway for those of us who are looking to convert an existing building.
All right.
Okay?
Thank you very much, sir. Are there any other comments?
Those of you joining us online, if you'd like to make a comment at the public hearing, please raise your hand now utilizing the function under your reactions tab. Otherwise, if you're on your phone, you can press *9. Mr. Chair, no one's raising their hand at this time.
All right. So let's close the in-person comments, and do we need to make a motion to close?
Yeah, we need to
Okay.
close the public.
Close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
All right, second?
I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, commission discussion and recommendations.
I guess I'll jump in. So this is super interesting to me because, I mean, this was revealing to me, so I think I have probably at least one ADU part of my property. Because when I moved in, I had 3 kitchens, 3 laundry rooms. It was very odd. They had set it up for, in the basement as an apartment, but then they added on, the mom added on, and they added a garage in the back, and I'm reading this going, I don't know how any of this applies to my property right now, because, I got a driveway goes around the back, up to a garage. How does this address thing work? There seems to be a lot of interesting dynamics. I also have a pole barn. We use it for a rec room, a 2,700 square foot pole barn. We're like, we gotta get water out there and some kind of bathroom, and of course, naturally, I already have refrigerators out there, and, toast, we have parties out there all the time, and, we have pool tables, we rollerblade out there, and I wouldn't even thought about this being an ADU, but if I got water and sewer, some kind of septic holding out there, which my wife desperately wants because she hates walking back and forth, I would have added, of course, I'm going to add a range in there. I already have refrigerators, and I guess technically that's an ADU. Oh, I wouldn't even thought about it. Honestly, I wouldn't even thought about it as an ADU. But I think technically that's an ADU, and that's a pole barn. Absolutely does not comply to the style, architectural style. So I'm like really in alignment with what you're talking about. Like something's off in the way it's written for property like that is, I guess, rural residential, because I'm on 10 acres. And so I'm not really sure what I'm saying. I thought about this and I was like, I think if it's in a basement, that's not an ADU technically, right?
So if there is an internal hallway, so basically if your house functions as a single family home, like if you can get from one part to the other part without going outside and it's connected internally, that's what I've been told is it's
Not an ADU.
not an ADU.
Okay.
It's flirting with.
Well, yeah, they took a
but-
bedroom and
yeah.
turned it into a kitchen, punched a hole through and did an addition.
You could certainly use it like that. It probably functions like that, or probably did at one point. But without having that, with it not being separated from the main part of the dwelling, it technically would not
Interesting.
be under this ordinance. No.
Interesting. So, but if I were to add a bathroom and a sink and a refrigerator out to my pole barn, at that point, it's now an ADU.
Well, the way that this is defined, the way that it has been defined in the past too, so we haven't really
Yeah.
changed this definition, other than making it clear what forms we would allow. The unit must have, and it sounds like Kendra has something to say too, but the unit must have bathroom facilities and kitchen facilities, including a sink with piped water arranged in a refrigerator. But it also says a separate self-contained dwelling unit, so that suggests that there needs to be like actual living space, so it's.
So not just a big open area that I have,
Yeah.
because I actually have a bunk bed in the back all right now. It's.
We're again flirting with
Yeah.
the line, yes.
Yeah, but I agree with what you're saying. For if you have an existing property, like an existing structure like that, it seems natural to like if my parents, I'm already set up for this kind of thing in this place I bought, but I can see maybe there's needs to be some flexibility with existing structures. I don't know what the right answer, maybe it's what George is proposing, but
I hear what you're saying. You have to keep in mind that some agricultural buildings we've been approving lately are like 7,000 square feet.
right?
So I do think we still need to set a limit. So maybe if we want to do some kind of CUP process for rural residential specifically, I still think it should be capped probably at 1,200, maybe 1,600 based on what other cities are allowing in the area. But I do think it's not meant to be a second single-family home.
Yeah, this is the same thing when we talked about the C-SWAT. I'm like, wait, so if he added this but didn't put a range in, and then it's like, well, it was just an addition, and then he adds a range. Now it's now converting an addition to an ADU. That's okay. This would be like adding a a pole barn to a property or a 800 square foot garage, if you don't put a range in there quite yet and do all the other stuff, it's not technically an ADU. And at that point, you know what I mean? There seems to be a little fishy stuff that could happen where we as the city wouldn't even know what's happening.
I get what you're saying, and that happens. And there's going to be people that don't, they're going to try to push the limits, no
Yeah.
matter how much standards we put.
Yeah.
However, there's also people like
George, yes, trying to do the right thing.
wants to do it on the up and up.
Yes, yes.
And that's the people I'm trying to work with. I can't control those, and we'll
That's
probably
fair.
find out if they're going to try to rent that out, especially with the rental ordinance that is potentially coming into place. Things like that will be uncovered, and we will have to deal with it. So, but as far, if someone truly wants to have a dwelling unit, they're gonna want the range.
Yeah.
So they're not gonna do some fishy thing so they don't have the range and now they can sleep in it. They're gonna want.
Well, right, and then we approve it where it looks all good, and then they put a range in later.
I mean, yeah, but again, we can't.
Yeah. Understood.
We can't always solve for people
Understood.
being naughty.
So with
best we
the
can.
address, with this kind of address or signage thing, I was a little bit confused on that. Like, so if there's a structure in the backyard and a driveway goes back there, is the expectation that there's some like sign that says this address is in the, sitting in their driveway pointing to the back?
I think from a public safety standpoint, if there's especially someone, potentially another human being, whether it's a young person and an older person, if someone needs medical attention or help, they need to be able to understand exactly where that dwelling is because it's a dwelling. And
Yeah.
so I think whatever would be required would,
Yes.
address-wise, would be.
So when I spoke with public safety about this, what they would like to see is if it's a ADU that's connected to the house, they want it to have a unit number because that would tell them that it's part of the house. If it's an ADU that's detached, they want it to have a building number. When we talked to Hennepin County, they said that wouldn't work with their current system. I don't know why. But so then we asked them, okay, so what can we do? And it's been 3 weeks. And I know my construction services specialist followed up with them and they still haven't responded. So it's going to have to be a fluid situation at this point. It's something we realize we have to address. There's other cities doing this, so there's got to be a solution. It's just I don't know the answer
Yeah.
to that. So that's why I'm reverting to a policy. We have a street naming policy, so we would add some kind of addressing to that once we have it nailed down. And then as far as the signage, we have to have some kind of unique identifier, and that would be part of, I think, the same policy that I referenced. We'll nail that down with public safety. If it is a unit number, it's a matter of making sure that that's posted. If it's, we can't have a unit number for whatever reason, then it's gonna have to be like ADU here. I don't know exactly. We're gonna have to figure that out, and that's why I tried to make the language fluid for now, so that it gives us ability to address that over the next few months. And then the walk, it doesn't have to be that the driveway goes to a detached ADU. You could possibly do that, but you need to have some kind of improved walkway, whether it's gravel or paved, but some kind of improved walkway from the driveway to the ADU entrance, whether it's detached or attached, and that gives proper access for public safety and emergency.
I was curious about the only one other question, there was around the parking. It said, so accessory dwelling unit parking, wait, maybe we didn't change the parking.
We didn't, nope,
Oh,
parking is
okay.
staying as is.
Well, okay, so I think this was in there. Parking spaces shall not conflict with principal dwelling unit parking spaces and shall comply with the requirements of this chapter. So what does it mean to, I wasn't sure what it meant by to conflict, to conflict.
Yes, so we did have some discussion about removing to conflict, and then I decided not to do that for the final staff report. We could certainly talk about that. The thinking, like, the way I interpret that is there should be, so there's the 2 parking spots for the single-family home, and then 1 to 2 parking spots for the ADU. So it should be so that the people in the single-family home can back out, the ADU people can back out without having to play Tetris in the driveway. That's how I interpret it. We could remove that and they can, figure it out for themselves. It's just.
They just need, I mean, in my opinion, it'd be better to do that. It needs to be off-street.
Exactly.
But, because, I mean, a lot of even newer houses now, my friend built this $1 million house, and they had a requirement in their area that they had to be these long just 2-car wide garages, but they're they're 4 cars fitting them, and they have 4 cars, there are 4 cars, and they gotta, and actually, he does, in that actual example, he did actually build I guess in our definition, it's not an ADU, but because they can get into it from the house, but it was an apartment for his mom. But the point is, that those were designed, I mean, they're always shuffling even just because that's the nature of it.
No, and again, we could remove the conflict verbiage. I'm not opposed to that. My only concern is that we're only, especially if we move to an administrative or CUP process, we're only gonna get one chance at this. So if we're basing the parking off of, oh, well, they're building it for their family member. Okay, but the next user is using it for actual rental property. Now we have people parking on the street.
Yeah, but I agree that must be off-street parking.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree that with that. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, I mean, how many people,
Yeah.
there's so many people who can't even park in their garages, because.
Well, I'm not
Yeah,
saying they
so
have to
crap
park in
in
the
there.
garage. I'm just saying they should be so far, our applications have been able to comply with.
It'd have to be 4 cars wide then.
Yeah, so the cease application, they have first of all, their driveway did this U thing to begin with.
Yeah.
And then they have the garage, and so they have the parking spaces in the garage, and then they have space for 2 cars behind the garage, and probably a little bit more than that, but they have that space. And then they put additional parking, improved parking area for the ADU to the side. That's how they complied with it, and they had a smaller house. I don't even think it was 2 acres, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was around 2 or 4 acres. I can't. But it was definitely not a 10-acre property, and they were able to easily comply with it. And I guess that's I haven't seen a problem with complying with it so far, and I would rather there not be a situation where, well, it's just become so much of a hassle for us to facilitate this, so you're just parking on the street, which now you're in violation.
Well, I'm just thinking of somebody with a 3-car garage. So if I have a 3-car garage, and I need to be able to now slide another slot to the left, I mean, if I'm saying I have all 4 should be able to back out simultaneously.
No, that's not what she's saying.
No.
She's not saying that it has to be 4 wide and you have to all be able to back out simultaneously. Like the Cease property, there were 2 parking spots here for the attached, and the other parking spot for the
Sure,
ADU was
yeah,
pulled off to
yeah.
the side. So just that there's no conflict if these folks are backing out and these folks are backing out, that's what it means
Right,
by
like
the no conflict.
the ADU spots, they're not blocking in the cars for the regular, so basically we're
By
not
being
stacking
directly
the
behind them.
cars.
Yeah.
Yeah, people are able to back out. It's not that they have to back out simultaneously. So however they want to design that, they can definitely make it. My mom, the way that she's a piano teacher in Egan, and so parking has been always fun growing up. So the way that she handled it is we have the regular parking, and then to the side we have additional parking.
Yeah.
So it's definitely doable in a lot of scenarios. I haven't seen it where it's not doable, and I just think it would probably make sense knowing that the use of the ADU can likely change throughout the life of the building if we're saying this is now a permanent use. So.
Yeah, it just seems overly restrictive, I guess. You have to have 2 off-street parking spots. But I don't know why we have to require, if I'm willing to, hey, honey, we'll rent this unit, we're gonna stack ours and we're fine, we can take one of the other cars, they get their spot. I'm just saying it seems a little overly restrictive,
Okay.
in my opinion, so, I don't know. And nobody else seems to think that's a big deal? Okay.
My comments were between the applicant and staff. I thought you did a great job sorting through all the issues, and I enjoyed watching the dialogue go back and forth regarding the various items that need to be considered. It seems like our accessory dwelling unit process is kind of archaic and outdated. It's time to do something different. Makes a ton of sense to do it with a conditional use permit versus an IUP. I think all the proposed changes that kind of you ended up with made a lot of sense. Probably the thing that I struggled the most with was that size issue, because what happens if you've got a 1,200 square foot dwelling, and what is the appropriate size for an ADU for that property, and then what happens if somebody's got a 5,000 square foot dwelling, and should that maximum size be whatever it is, 1,000 square feet, regardless of whether the dwelling is a 5,000 square foot dwelling or a 1,200 square foot dwelling? And that was probably the thing that I struggled with the most, as I was thinking about how do we establish the standards for what's that maximum size is, and should it vary depending upon the size of the main dwelling, recognizing Corcoran's got a lot of diversity in its housing stock.
And so where did you end up?
I think I came to the conclusion that it would make some sense to have the size of the ADU be some percentage of the main dwelling, but then also have a maximum size for that ADU.
Versus
Saying
The-
everybody is.
versus the zoning, right? That was the other option, right? Where one of these was the Blaine, or one of them had an option, something about low density or something.
Yes, so Blaine has.
Like a rural residential.
I can pull it up right here. So Blaine has lesser of 50% of the principal dwelling units, living floor area, up to 960 square feet in most districts. They allow a maximum of 1,200 square feet allowed in their lowest density districts, so our rural residential. And then detached ADUs cannot exceed 25% of the rear yard, so those are their size limitations.
I just thought it was challenging to say the maximum size of the ADU should be the same regardless of the size of the principal dwelling.
Yes, I hear what you're saying, definitely. I wasn't trying to take away any rights, that's why. So right now, the way it currently reads is it cannot exceed the gross floor area
Right.
up to 800 square feet. I'm not trying to reduce someone's ability to build up to 800 square feet. I don't like taking away people's rights, I like giving more where I can. So that's why I have the current language as proposed, without a percentage. If we want to talk about, I do think it would be doable to talk about a CUP process for the rural residential to go up to 1,200 or slightly different process for that, yes.
Well, like I said, I thought you guys did a great job of considering all the issues and coming up with a plan that makes a lot more sense than the way it's currently set up.
And so I will say that the roof pitch, I agree with. I think that we could do away with it. That is oftentimes in a smaller dwelling, like you said, the steeper roof pitch, so that you can have like one wall particularly facing west or whatever with a lot of the windows to increase the light in a small space. So I definitely see the reasoning behind that. So I'm in favor of that. The use type and review through the application process, and then switching from the interim use to the conditional use, I would agree with as well. I do think that we need to keep the in conflict for the parking spots, only because it is the one chance you have at doing something. And so someone's original intent for creating something is not going to stay with that property forever, as it changes hands with users. And so I do think that if that's an opportunity to ensure that future uses, it might be a little bit of a hindrance upon initial construction, but it ensures the safety all the way down the road. I think, I guess it was brought up, because here is where I landed with the size limit, is that I do think that 960 seems reasonable to me. If this is an accessory dwelling unit, it is not a second single-family home. We're not trying to provide an opportunity to snatch up a development right that is not given to a property owner, and that needs to be then less than our minimum square footage for a single-family home. I understand that will be that will differ in terms of what it looks like, but also living in the rural residential neighborhoods, I don't want to see, I feel like just because someone has a larger square footage, it feels like a right given to that individual. Do you know what I mean? It just feels like setting kind of an equitable standard seems to be a better route. And then piggybacking on that, when we have unique situations where we have an older agriculture building, that's trying to be converted, it was brought up that the process is not to use a variance, and I understand that we don't want to approach a variance as a process, right? A variance is meant to be those exceptions. But if there is something that wasn't going to fit, that is the place, that is the inroad, then to begin to take an accessory structure and convert it, or is it not?
I don't, what is the constraint of the site, the physical constraint of the site that says the ADU must be bigger?
Right.
So that's why the variance wouldn't work.
Okay. Okay. So that's what I'm trying to understand, because I do understand, we happen to have an accessory dwelling, but we do use it as a barn. But if somebody comes along after us and doesn't want animals but wants to convert it, what would then be their process, they would just have to go through the reconstruction, right? So that would be the cost in which they would have to pay in order to get the gain of that accessory dwelling unit within that structure.
Yes, and keep in mind, our gross floor area definition doesn't include areas dedicated for parking or loading, stairwells, elevator shafts, mechanical equipment. So if it was a situation where it's an existing accessory structure, and they want to convert that to an ADU, theoretically, now, practically, could always be exceptions, but they could potentially find a way to convert the portion of they can up to the square foot as an ADU, and the rest is their garage. And then that wouldn't count towards that gross floor living area.
So all that to say, I was in favor of setting the size limit. Now, whether we land at 1,000 square feet or 960 square feet, I mean, I didn't necessarily have the making it divisible by 8 seemed to make a lot of sense. So I didn't necessarily have a strong, I could go either way.
Yeah, and as far as the size limit, my thought was that 75% was brought forward as a possible percentage of the main floor of the principal dwelling. And maybe if we wrote it up such as it says 75% of the main floor of the principal dwelling, or 1,000 feet, or 960 feet, whatever, whichever is, it would be lower.
Smaller.
Smaller. So if we wrote it up that way, we could cover, in that case, no, it wouldn't,
If you went with smaller, it would land on the 1,000 though. You're not giving any space if you said whatever smaller.
It would not address my issue, which was the necessity of adding 16 feet by 24 feet to accommodate the utility additions, the bathroom addition, the kitchen area. If I stuck with the 960, it's basically, I might as well park a travel trailer out there and put a doorway into the travel trailer and use the bathroom there.
yeah.
Because that's basically what I would have. So 1,200 would handle it. It's, actually, I think it's 1,156 is what it would be. But what I'm saying is an existing building and also in rural areas, you could be more flexible on the size. Most people could not, if you asked them to, look at a building from the road and tell you how many square feet it is.
No.
They couldn't. I would challenge any of you to get within 15 or 20% of the size of a building looking at it from the road. You can't do it. But when you're on a 3-acre lot or larger, or a 10-acre lot, a 1,200 or 1,500 square foot accessory building is nothing. Most people are putting in much bigger ones. And I'm not suggesting that people are going to go out there and convert an accessory building that's already being used into a dwelling unit very often. It's very unusual. For one thing, the economics are not there, because you would not be able to comply with the standards for snow loads and all the other kinds of things that you need to have, insulation, all the things that you need to have for an occupied dwelling, which is quite different from accessory building use. It just so happens that I built mine to a standard that's better than my house. And so now I sit there with something I don't want to cannibalize to put a bathroom in.
I so understand and appreciate. I just don't know that we should be, taking that into consideration, but should we be writing the code then for that unique situation? That's where I'm wrestling.
All I'm asking, and I think, again, I said earlier, I go along with the staff's comment. For new construction, a size limit makes a lot of sense. But if you're doing a conversion, where you're already dealing with a constraint of the building, the conditional use would allow you to have a little bit more flexibility, and you could have a little bit higher upside limit, if you will, on that. I could probably go into my building and I could draw off an area, put up a wall, and say this is no longer part of the living space. This is now gonna be where I'm gonna put my, bicycle, my exercise bike.
Right.
So it's now a recreation section. I could do that and still comply with the technicality of the rule. But that's not what I want to do.
Right, and super appreciated. I just am really wrestling with the fact that, like, I don't want to write an ordinance and pass it through for such a unique scenario either. And so, is there any way to then, is it true that if this is set at this size limit, then there is no opportunity or no mechanism for him to be able to?
Commissioner Bremen, yes, so under this ordinance, unfortunately, it wouldn't quite be the size limit he wants. So he would have to figure, he would need to basically have some areas designated for mechanical equipment and parking or loading, and that would be the way to kind of bypass it based on the existing building. Or we could do a CUP process up to 1180, or I'm trying to figure out what would be divided by 8.
Sure.
Well,
Try
I
to
mean, just
really
look at what Blaine
minimize
did,
it.
right? They did what we, basically what you proposed, plus a maximum of 1,200 square feet are allowed in low-density district. I mean, if you just add that, then that gets us rural residential's treated a little bit different than everybody else, and everywhere else is still the same, which is this, I mean, in their case, 960.
And just keep in mind, rural residential is our biggest area by
Sure,
far.
but these are the bigger lots
Yeah.
generally, too.
Well, but not all of them. Some of
Fair
them are
enough,
only.
fair
in
enough.
acre. So it just, but yes, that is where you are going to see our biggest lots, but it's also, we have some older areas that were subdivided. So I'm not trying to say we can't do it, because we can. Obviously, I pulled a lot of cities' ordinances to show you what we could do. And this was something, I mean, there is a CUP process for a slightly bigger building in the lowest district. I just want to make sure that we make it limited, because really the ADU, the inherent ability for ADUs to be less impactful to the environment, to socially, and to infrastructure, is the fact that it's smaller. So they should be smaller. So I don't know if maybe if it's a detached unit in the rural residential, up to 1,200 square feet could be approved through CUP. Maybe that makes the most sense. But otherwise, it should default to the, whatever we'd like to
Yeah.
set, whether it's 960 or 1,000.
Something like that.
Either of them.
Yeah, I like what you just said, Natalie.
Yeah.
All right. So we can make that change.
Well, one last comment that I will add is, it has, not specific to this ordinance, but in the creation of a rental ordinance, does that then mean that we are going to be hiring as a city inspectors to uphold licensing? And does that mean then additional tax dollars in order to fulfill that role and requirement?
So the licensing will have fees associated
Yep.
with it that should help offset
Okay.
costs of the program with the inspection. Currently, the discussion is my part-time assistant is about to just get thrown to the wolves and have to be partly inspecting for code enforcement and rental. So we'll see how much of a demand there is. Well, the first couple of years is going to be about collecting data, so it might be eventually that we need some kind of inspector that's outside of the planning assistant, because we have a lot to do in planning. But that was, at this point, without having more concrete data as to how many rental properties are actually out there and how many rental properties are coming in, it made more sense to work with an existing position and just make it full-time rather than part-time. So that's currently the plan, but it has not been approved officially. That's just the working plan in progress.
Okay, so do we have a motion on this project?
Can I ask one more quick question? Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay, it's around which I guess we didn't strike this, but around the styles. I know we talked about the roof pitch, but the architectural style, like, I'm just thinking, okay, my pole barn is very large, but if I had a 1,100 square foot pole barn that was designed for, how it needed to be designed, but it's metal, it's a metal pole barn, and I want to convert that, is that technically not allowed?
They would need to redo the siding.
The siding would need to be changed to match, and then the roof would need to be taken off and put I mean, you can't, I don't even know if you can do a pole barn without metal. I mean, it's kind of, you know, that's kind of the intent of it. That's how it structurally
Yeah,
holds
and,
it.
and with the pole barn, we're also talking about building code for it to actually be a dwelling. So a lot of times barns, people want to do a different use with them, like assembly or dwelling, but it doesn't really pan out with a barn. Usually an accessory dwelling unit is added to a garage. That's usually where you see it.
Sure, sure. I'm just, again, thinking of an existing structure that maybe is, but it's a pole barn. It needs to be metal. That's how they're
They'll have to
structured
do
in a way
lot of
for that.
work. Yes, they'll have to do a lot of work if that's what they want to use.
We would say, I know that building's been there for 15 years, but you want to actually live in it now, you need to change the siding.
Yeah, because now you're talking about 2 to 3 people living in it, whereas before it was just being used for storage.
Yeah, again, I'm assuming
I did it.
it's stable and, oh, you converted a pole barn
You
to?
can put siding on a pole barn.
Oh,
So, I mean, there's a
cover up the
cost,
metal.
You just wrap the siding, right. I have a pole barn at my house, and it's sided to match my house.
Oh, God, I better
That
not
is
tell my
the-
wife that.
And there's some cities that require all accessory structures to have similar color and material, just so that we're a little different in this area in that we don't require that, and I think that we used to, but we've taken that requirement out, but for ADUs.
I'll stop asking questions about that.
But for ADUs, I do think that is important because it minimizes the impact to an existing neighborhood. It does help to retain the character. And I know it makes, you can make the argument if it's an existing structure, it's already there. I do understand that
Yeah.
point of view, but when we're talking about ones that are new especially, like, it really should match the house. It makes sense to minimize the
No, I
impact.
totally agree with that, yeah. I just like thinking, but then somebody could also put one in place and go, well, it's now here, and then, so then you end up with that same problem again. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, so I will make a motion to approve the ordinance change with the, or do you want to, go
I
ahead.
just want to make sure, so we want everything to be CUP though? Or did we want an administrative process in most situations? We didn't really talk on that, but
Oh, we can talk on that before. I will pull my motion.
I apologize.
No, not at all. I had it written down as use, type, and review. And so I mean, honestly, when it comes to that, I would default to what works. What do you see as the best as
Yeah.
on staff, right?
As a planner,
Right.
keeping things by right as much as possible.
Is easier.
Well, it's not necessarily easier, but you run into a lot less angry people. But I do think with the rural residential exceeding from 960 to 1200, that should be a CUP. But if we wanted to do an administrative permit process, then it reduces the cost and the hurdle for applicants, and it's quicker. So that definitely is something that we could do, so that there's still a review process. We can still potentially have some conditions that are based on the standards that we've already established. But it's, you trust me to make sure, so it's up to you with kind of discretion we're willing to give up as a city.
So with that being said, then I would go towards administrative approval, as you said, on anything that meets that 960. I would say keep it at 960 for the, other than the low density, which would go up to 1200, and at that point, ask for a CUP.
All right.
That would be what I would make my motion for.
All right.
I will second that.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you for the lesson. You did your research, too.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the staff as well, because, she did a pretty thorough job
Yes.
of researching the local community.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we agree on 90%.
Hey, the best negotiation is when both people feel like they kind of lost a little bit, right?
Now, remember, you can only have 10% of your frontage as signage.
Well, I'm not looking to rent. This is strictly like still going to be recreation building and still going to be family.
All right, invite us over.
Yeah. My wife will be jealous. A lot of pressure.
All right.
We don't need that.
Item C, is anyone here to,
Does anybody care?
all right. Does anybody see what I see? Public hearing on the dedication subdivision ordinance amendment and the staff report.
Yes, Chair Jessica Bizey, our city administrator, is on the call, and she is going to give our brief presentation here, because she's the one that worked on this project.
Thank you, Commission. Thank you for having me tonight. I have a very brief overview of our park dedication ordinance. Could I get the next slide? Thank you. So, per the direction of City Council, we are proposing some updates to our park dedication requirements for the subdivision ordinance, as well as the park dedication cash requirements. We try to do this on a fairly regular basis, but we were directed to do so earlier this year, and we're going to try to do it on a pretty regular basis. So, park dedication is our tool to fund any necessary park improvements consistent with a park plan, and it's authorized by state statute. We do have to use the fair market value of the land as well as other relevant data, and we relied on data from existing sales data and contacted the city assessor's office to make sure that the data that we had seemed to align with what they had in their, that they did at least a review of our data, and we utilized a lot of that sale data to help us get those to create our program. We did base it on the 2040 plan, and we did update it based on current costs. So next slide, please. So park dedication is going, we are proposing a increase to park dedication for 2022, moving that up a bit based on current costs that are out there. The fees would be amended by the City Council as part of the 2023 fee schedule. There were several factors that resulted in that increase. The land value has increased since the last update. Overall construction costs have increased significantly. We made sure to include the boardwalk in that, as well as we've had planned for several years as part of the comp plan, those over and underpass crossings. So those are the proposed park dedication amounts. We'll be looking at making some changes as well to the park dedication requirements for land to 5%, 10%, 19, 30, 21, 23, and 4% on those relative different land use categories. So it is an increase in some categories, a slight decrease in others, but overall it's based on the park land that we need to get for those different densities. So with that, we recommend opening the public hearing and move to recommend the approval of the draft ordinance updating the park dedication ordinance for section 955 of the city code. We will be updating those fees with a fee schedule amendment. So tonight's public hearing is really on the subdivision ordinance, which would be those land percentages, and then the fees would be we'd be adopting that with the 2023 fee schedule that we adopt at the end of this month. And so with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
We do have a couple people online.
Okay.
Public hearing.
Could we have public hearing?
Yeah, so members of the public online, if you'd like to participate in the public hearing regarding park dedication, please raise your hand utilizing the reactions menu. Otherwise, if you're on your phone, press *9. And no one is raising their hand.
Okay. Make a motion to close the public discussion.
I'll make that motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the public hearing is closed. I just would want to start out by saying that this is the first community that we've owned property in that has park dedication fee. And I guess I'm just wondering, I don't know much about it, but I'm wondering why it's mandatory, a mandatory tax on the homeowners.
Mr. Chair, yeah, go ahead, Jessica.
I could speak to that a little. So this is only for when land is subdivided, so it's not a tax on the owners of property. It's only when land is developed. So it's a way under state statute to allow for the development of your parks and trail system. And so I can't speak to the other cities that they may have lived in, but I can see many of their surrounding cities and the several cities that I've worked for have had park dedication. Kendra and Natalie might be able to speak to that a little bit more with their experience in other cities, but it is a common tool that cities across the state utilize, and so it's really a tool to help fund that as development comes in, because folks are going to be utilizing those park resources to help fund that.
So
is generally how it's been used as the tool.
This is not something that Judy and I pay every year. This is for new.
No.
Okay.
It is just something, this is specifically for new subdivisions, and I believe it's only subject to subdivisions. Kendra and Natalie can correct me if I'm wrong, but it is really for those new, either new development or change in types of uses through the planning process.
Thank you very much for the explanation. Any other discussions?
I have no discussion or questions.
I was curious, what's the boardwalk? Where's the boardwalk at?
You could look on the map, Jay.
I don't know, where is it?
So we are putting in a boardwalk in the open space park at Bellwether. And so that is one area that we've been, when that project was proposed, we had been talking about a boardwalk. And so that's a project that we are working on finalizing the details for in the next year to get it built.
Jess, the comprehensive plan shows several future boardwalks, but the fee schedule only reflects Bellwether, the boardwalk that was deeded with in the park that was deeded with Bellwether, right?
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments or, okay. Do I have a motion to approve the
I will make a motion to approve the ordinance update.
you.
You are welcome, sir.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. Okay. That ends the projects portion of our meeting. We now have planning project update.
Yeah, so no actions required, but if you have any questions about my memo, just let me know.
Not I. Okay. City Council report, Council Liaison Varenkamp.
Go ahead.
I've got a question for you. I'm chomping at the bit. Is
What I
there,
was gonna say.
is there an update about the truth and taxation meeting?
A what?
The truth and taxation meeting that was announced in the Corcoran newsletter bulletin that came out, but it said that the format was going to be announced at a later date? Nope, okay. I'll
Yes.
check website for update.
Just still on?
Jess?
Yeah, I'm still on. I could answer that. So we do have, so I apologize, I'm not remembering exactly that part on the newsletter, but folks can comment in person or virtually. We will be having that public comment period on the 8th, for our next meeting on the 8th. So folks can certainly do that. Right now, it's one of the first of the scheduled items on the council agenda. So we'll have an opportunity if folks want to comment on the budget itself. Generally, the valuations and some of the other pieces to the tax levy process are completed earlier in the year, but definitely if there are questions on the budget or anything else, we would be happy to answer those at that time.
It was just the proposal for the increase in the city
My-
portion next year.
My take on it and everything that we've been talking on as the council and the mayor is we've done everything we can not to increase our city portion of our taxes. And Jess, please let me know if
Sure.
I'm incorrect.
We-
The overall percentage increase is related to
Inflation.
everything that's been happening the last year and such. As a resident in town, I'm not pleased that my assessment of my home and my property went up over $130,000.
Yeah.
And my tax bill is going up $1,400 more a year. But, and I know it's easy to say and easier to understand, but if you look at the city portion of your property taxes, while it went up, most of it went up related to the assessment value. And some of it went up because of inflation. I think Minneapolis is coming in at about a 12% increase in.
Some are at
taxes.
18%.
Some are as high as 18. I
Yeah.
think our number, Jess,
So if we're looking at our overall levy, our levy increased a lot. It increased by over 20%.
Right.
I would note our tax rate went down. So if we didn't have valuation increases, you would have seen a decrease in your tax. So
takes a long time to get there, but.
Oh, we never
it's a
see
decrease.
a devaluation of our taxes. No, I will attend whether, virtually, I understand the
Yeah.
valuation process happens early in the year. I understand the valuation process is done by Hennepin County, which is interesting to me because they're also the ones who collect. But it was more because there is a niche of people who do not qualify for agricultural discounts because on my property, we produce more food than most other people, but we're not eligible. And so my only plea would be this: if there is ever an opportunity for the council before the Hennepin County Commission or a committee or whatever to make a case for people to be eligible for green acres who produce for themselves or even just for their neighbors, it's such a great thing when you can. I'm gonna so miss that Rolling Hills Road that you can't just drive down and pick up fresh, locally grown fruits and vegetables. Their property taxes were astronomical, and but every single inch of that 15 acres was producing food for the community. So all that to say, that's my plug, and I know you understand it, but if there was any way to plead a case for the homesteaders, I know some people don't consider them farmers, producers, agriculture, whatever you want, that do not qualify for that agricultural tax program that it was taken away in the Green Acres program in the early 2000s by the Hennepin County. But if there's ever an opportunity, I would just ask for representation for that group of people.
I'll speak very loudly if we're ever.
Well, you just let me know, I'll send some emails. Thank you. But that was the only thing I had.
My beehives produced 4,800 pounds of honey this year. So,
4,800 pounds.
crazy. Pretty cool.
Okay.
That's why I'm so sweet. Otherwise, everything else is in your packet here as far as the list of council stuff. We are talking about Corcoran Farm still in that open thing while the recommendation came from the planning commission recommending denial. We are still working through that and no decision has been made yet. So I know that was a big one with Chair Lanterman and stuff. I wanted to make sure you guys know. Feel free to jump on. I still don't know which way that is gonna go, so.
When does that go back to council again?
21st.
It's,
Next week.
that's next week. tremendous amount of input beyond what you guys got input from your public hearing we got. Significant amount also. So, and tonight, guys, outstanding. Thank you for your input, your thoughts and ideas on all three of these things. Great work, all y'all. I mean it. Staff, you too. It's refreshing to get that level of input, whether you agree or not with something. It's very neat to hear the input from the four of you tonight. So good job.
All right. Then other business is the 2022 annual report and 23 priority setting.
Yes, so this can be real simple. This is just a draft of the report I plan to forward to, I'm not quite sure which city council meeting. When I talked with the city administrator last, we were planning to forward it in January, so they have it for their goal-setting meetings. I just don't know if that's gonna be the first or second January meeting. But if you wanted to make any changes to your priorities listed, if you see any other errors, please let me know. Otherwise, I just need a thumbs up, and this is what we'll send.
Well, we just hit ADU, so.
A lot of the heavy lifting on that one's been done, right?
Yes, so that one, we can take off. I wasn't quite sure how tonight was gonna go, that's why I put it on there, but I could take that off, definitely, yes.
Okay. Do we need to?
No, I don't, I don't really need a formal motion, I just, wanted to have feedback before I forward it.
All right. Then the liaison calendar, next week, it's Jay
Yep.
on Thursday, and then Commissioner Drummond on the 21st, and then a new year already. Anybody have any issues?
It's a
It
Wednesday.
does say the 21st, I'm sorry, that's supposed to be the 22nd,
Okay.
It is on the Thursday.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
sorry. You can join virtually, though, you do not need to be there in person if, you wanna sit home in front of your fireplace to drink hot cocoa. I
My really loud children in the house. Not work.
It's up to you.
They can stay in the barn.
I'll just bring my cocoa here.
Give you some excuse for some quiet time.
And to that respect, we were talking of moving it
Yeah,
in the week,
yep.
but our quorum would not have been filled if
Okay.
we would have done that, so it stayed on the 22nd.
I will make note of the change on calendars.
Okay, with that, with all our work presumably finished, do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right, somebody second.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Amen. It's coming apart.